PGA fans, oh, how I've missed you. And the good news is Tiger is back. COVID is back. And we are back. We are back with another show, the Sentry Tournament. We're in Hawaii. I am pumped, and I'm here with my trusted co-host, as always, Sia Najad, Spencer Aguiar. Fellas, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I missed you guys during this little mini break that we had. I'm rejuvenated to get back to the show and ready to have a good 2022.
Yeah, Joel. It's funny you brought up the Tiger thing. For some reason, I feel like that's so long ago. The Tiger news, but it was like a month ago. That's super exciting. I know there's a lot of talk about where he's actually going to play and how successful he's going to be. But just the fact that he's in the news and he's healthy, super cool. But I got to tell you, man, the last month-ish has felt like a year for some reason. I feel like the golf season stalled for months, and it's really, it hasn't been that long, which leads me to believe I just really love golf, or I love betting and playing DFS golf at the very least. So I'm actually really excited to have a tournament. It's only a 39-person field because, of course, Joel, as you know, Hank Lebioda decided not to play this week, which, that's his option, of course. But with that said, it's only 38 because Cam Champ just ducked out as well. He has COVID. But I'm excited. Let's get this thing going.
I'm pumped. This is always an interesting tournament. It never lacks drama, which is going to be fun. It's a good way to start the season back off. We're getting all the champions, right? So we got a good field, but it's a no-cut event. So it's a little different from a DFS perspective. We're getting 4 days from everyone. It's a smaller field. It's, what is it? You said 38 now, right, Zia?
Yep, 38. Yep.
38, that's pretty small from a DFS perspective. So ownership's going to come into play more so because, there's going to be higher ownership just because there's less guys to choose from. But let's go ahead and break it down. I think, for starters, we want to look at the course. I find this course a bit of a challenging one to break down. It's definitely not an easy course. But I think, it can give some guys fits, especially we've seen some drama on Sundays and at the 18th hole in the past year. I think we could get that again this week. But, of course, nothing has changed. The best course breakdown you're going to find is going to be from Spencer. So, Spencer, please help us out. What are you looking at this week on the course in Hawaii?
Well, as always, I appreciate the introduction there, Joel, but the property was designed in 1991 by Ben Crenshaw and Bill Corr. I did undergo a minor restoration a few years back that was meant to enhance the difficulty. With that being said, I can't say I've seen any real change in the property becoming more challenging. Yes, the 2020 iteration of the tournament did produce vastly different scores than we were accustomed to seeing when Thomas won the event at 14 under par. But in my opinion, and really any way you want to look at it, the real culprit that year ended up being the wind. Without that coming into play, 2021 returned to the typical birdie shootout with 34 of the 42 players finishing 11 under par or better, and everyone in the top 10 shot between 19 under to 25 under. So as a whole, the course is rather straightforward. I do think you have some undulation and elevation that need to be discussed, and I do think that players that have played this course before will have a benefit because of those reasons, but you kind of see what you get here. The PGA Tour is not trying to punish players for winning a title last year. Instead, the purpose is to provide a fun start to the year for anyone who earned their right into this field. Fairways average over 50 yards in length, which in turn makes driving accuracy 12.5% higher than your average tour stop. It is worth noting that Kapalua is the only par 73 on the PGA Tour. That, along with the elevation that I mentioned, quiets the nearly 7,600 yard total. That might appear jarring at first glance. I think that conversation of distance and yardage is an important one this week. Players are going to be able to do pretty much anything they want off the tee. That sometimes means distance becomes a prerequisite at a track like that. But you don't have to look any further than some of the past winners being Patrick Reed, Jordan Spieth, Zach Johnson to tell you that weighing it into a model potentially becomes a dangerous game to play. The top 6 participants finished last year in this tournament 25th, 17th, 7th, 31st, 12th, and 32nd in distance during that week. Instead, I would kind of rather look at some rollover predictability stats when building out a model here. So I started with 15% on proximities that were more prevalent here than tour average. I do want to quickly note that the ranges of 0 to 100 and 200 plus were the only distances that qualified. Those two yield a 45.1% of the approach shots, which I don't typically recommend looking at something if you're going to leave 50% of the quantifiable stats on the table. But I liked how those two provided your best scoring opportunities. There are going to be some of the easier par fours there. All the par fives are going to require a long iron in. Sure, doing it that way, I likely miss out on some of the random chances that might come between a yardage like 100 to 125 yards. But proximity totals tend to be a faulty statistics when you aren't building it out to completely mimic a course. I did 12.5% on easy to hit fairways at average to longer courses. I like the statistic because it doesn't punish your wayward accuracy drivers like Spieth or Reed. If they can win here, I want to see who improves when the fairways open up. Not, who's the longest, who's the straightest on a normal track. 12.5% on strokes gained total on slow to average Bermuda greens. As everyone knows by now, I very rarely, if ever, weigh strokes gained putting as a whole. I do think putting is important to throw into a model, but I prefer doing it in a fashion where it comes from a less straightforward approach than saying, these are the best putters on tour. These are the best players that are going to be putting well. Each course is different. I like building a model to relay some of the important intangibles. And that brings me to the 10% I use for putting average from 5 to 10 feet. I personally prefer this route over 3-putt percentage for two core reasons. I think you can use 3-putt and be just fine. But one, it separates my thought process marginally when the majority of users are going with the 3-putt route. But more importantly, these greens are wildly different than most stops where 3-putting becomes an issue. This is a much slower and grainier Bermuda surface. I have 15% on a course-specific par 4 category. There are 11 in total. 8 of them are under 425 yards. The additional 3 play at least 520. And then I wrapped it up with 17.5% on both par 5 birdie or better and overall birdie or better. 35%, no matter how you want to measure it, it's going to be a really large amount. But with 34 of the 42 players last year being 11 under par or better, I think you're going to have to reach 25 under or better to win this event. I don't think personally that underweighting that category is the right way to play it. I'd rather go overweight on it. I think that margins are very small. Kind of as Joel was saying, there's theatrics down the stretch of this tournament. I want people that can make birdies and be able to run up a score if need be with it. So that's how I'm weighing the tournament this week. As with it being straightforward, I do think there are some unique routes that you can go different with that. Like there's sand safe percentage. There's other things. Maybe you could look at distance, but that's the way I like playing it.
I mean, Joel, can I just say something real quick? How much did you miss that? Oh, by the way, I'm not even like trying to be like coy or like funny. I genuinely missed his course breakdowns. Joel, am I alone here?
No, I was starting to look at the information for the tournament earlier today, and I was like, man, I really need to hear what Spencer has to say about this before I can't even, I'm like handicapped. I can't even move forward until I listen to Spencer.
So what I do, I mean, I create my own model, which is not nearly as sophisticated as Spencer's, as you might imagine. And after this show, I will usually just go back a couple times and just listen to what Spencer said, because I might not try to mimic his model. I think that would kind of be fruitless if I even attempted to do that. But there might be things that he said that I just didn't catch the first time. So I have to go back and be like, all right, okay, this is so anyway, I think anybody who's listening should probably go back on every single one of these shows. And maybe you agree or disagree with his analysis. The cool thing is Spencer usually talks about why he put something in or why he left something out. And every single Tuesday night, we start the show doing this. So I think it's a really good idea. If maybe you hate my opinion, maybe you hate Joel's opinion, but I think listening to what Spencer is including in his model is really fundamental to actually like picking people, because everybody has their own models, but none of them are quite as sophisticated. We know how successful Spencer is in general in the betting market and the DFS market. So I just absolutely love it. And
I'll add, the majority of what Spencer gives you, isn't an opinion. It's just facts about what you need to look at for this course. I mean, some of it's his opinion on what to look for, but a lot of it is just facts from previous data on the course history and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, while I might give you a lot of my subpar opinions, this is just facts. We're giving you a straight facts.
So a lot of people listening, Joel, I know we want to finally get into the players and whatnot, but Isaiah, Charlie piping in, Courtney, who, by the way, just like Isaiah, is really good at DFS NFL, DFS football, as I came to learn over the last couple of weeks. So shout out to Courtney there. And then, of course, the king of all podcasts. If you're not following Michael Raziel, please give him a follow. Super nice guy. He came on to an NFL DFS show that Jason Mizrahi and I did last Thursday night. It was good to have him back in the saddle, so to speak. But best in the business. That must have been referring to Spencer, but Joel, let's just give it to the whole group. I'm not, you know what I mean? Let's go ahead and take that. Anyway, thank you, Courtney. Thanks everybody for chiming in here. And Joel, I'll give it back to you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, we're excited, man. We needed a tournament. We got one. We got the guys that we want to root for, right? Forget the JV, who's on the Corn Ferry Tour. We got the big names this week. Let's dive right into it, right? I think the pricing, I think, is pretty fair on these guys. It enables you to, for the most part, kind of play who you want to play. So let's dive right into the top tier. Sia, do you want to kick us off? Who do you like up top here?
You know what? I want to kick us off, but let me ask you guys a question real quick, because we were talking about ownership before this show started, or we were texting about ownership, I should say. And I just want to get both your opinions before we dive in here, because I think when you get a 39-person field and you get a field that's as talented as this field is, especially from like the 8,300, I'm talking DraftKings prices, the 8,300 pricing range and up, and coincidence, 8,300 is where Cam Smith is. So this is a tournament where the 8K and 9K range, especially the 8K range, I think is way more rich than a normal tournament would be because of the structure and who is in this tournament, what this tournament is. With that said, my thought, when I was talking about this yesterday on another show was, man, this seems like a real good game theory play. Like if I'm going to the golfers in the 8 and 9K range and even the 10K range, like they're not that far apart from each other. And so my thought is, if I have a guy, like we were looking at ownership, and as of right now, like let me just name a couple names, like Sam Burns, Justin Thomas, Cam Smith, Sung Jae Im, Xander Schauffele. They all seem to be really popular, like well north of 25%. Why wouldn't I avoid most of those guys? Can somebody answer that question for me, knowing how rich it is in the 8K and 9K and 10K range, outside of those guys?
Here's my one maybe rebuttal to that. Mm-hmm. Because there's so few golfers, you have to be pretty perfect. So if you kind of fade somebody who's pretty highly owned, and they end up getting first, second, or third, you're done. So I'm not going to completely fade guys that are pretty highly owned, but I am going to try and prioritize, maybe have a higher exposure to some lower owned guys to give me that chance where I can go out and win. But, if Xander's, you like Xander this week and you think he's going to do well, and even though he's really high owned, you got to at least sprinkle. You don't be too afraid to sprinkle in, as long as you are aware of the high ownership and make some other plays to counter it.
Yeah, I think these tournaments, like Joel said it really well, you need to be precise in the decisions that you make to win it. And that's why if you take a Xander and throw him completely off of your board, and he wins the tournament, like it's going to be in for a long week. I think there's ways to go about it that you can get around ownership. Now, I agree, and Isaiah just said it too. I kind of like the balanced build approach this week. I think one of the ways you can go about it, and I will get more into it, I think you can start in the $8,000 range, and I think you already diversify your starting point that way with it. The $9,000 range only has 3 golfers. I think most people will still want to start there, though.
Yep.
The other thing you can do, and this is if you want to play a guy like, Justin Thomas is going to be very popular. You're just going to have to leave an extreme amount of money, or a more extreme amount of money on the table than you're used to doing. So I think there's ways to combat the issue of ownership. I think one of it would be go a little bit more balanced, starting the 8,000s. The second that makes sense is just build a unique lineup. You can still take popular choices, but just leave more money on the table than you were planning on doing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And by the way, I wasn't necessarily suggesting fade all those guys, but I was suggesting it might not be a bad idea in this tournament just because of how level the playing field is in that 8 to 9 to 10K range. But no, I think your answers are perfect, honestly. But Joel, to answer your question, so in this elite range, this 10K and above range, there's a few guys I have my eye on. John Rahm is one of them, kind of an obvious one there. I think Bryson might be my favorite guy if I factor in ownership and course fit and all of those things. And I noticed that in this range, it doesn't look like Victor Hovland is super highly owned, or it doesn't look like he's going to be super highly owned. Obviously, we have to wait for Steven's article that comes out on windailysports.com at around 5-6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That ownership article will sort of tell us the story. But if he's going to be low owned, I mean, I like Victor Hovland anyway. If he's going to be low owned relative to some of these other guys like your Justin Thomases, I might just end up going there. But I think we're at the right time to maybe buy into Bryson early on this course. So it's Bryson, it's Rahm, and it's Victor Hovland for me up here.
I like it. Spence, talk to me. Who are you looking at up top?
Yeah, I mean, more or less of what Sia just said. Those are my sentiments too. Now, the Hovland thing is somewhere I'm not going to get. We only have 39 players teeing it up or 38 players, I guess, now teeing it up this week. So I do think Sia, of what he's saying of the game theory standpoint, makes a lot of sense of trying to diversify it. We talk about this every single week on the show. It doesn't mean that we only want to play low-owned players with it, but to me, there's two players that I really like, and it's the two guys not named Victor Hovland that Sia said. And so John Rahm at 11,000 and Bryson DeChambeau at 10,200. I think Rahm is safe. I think a top 10 is most likely for him, maybe of any player in this field. He's never finished worse than 10th in his 4 prior showings, and it's going to be impossible to run and model, at least an adequate model, that doesn't show him as one of the main threats to take home the title. I guess my biggest issue with him is these types of tournaments are counterintuitive to play him, and that being birdie fest type tournaments, I think it limits his upside a little bit. That's something we can work around if the leverage situation remains where it is with him of being only about 20%. But it is worth noting when you're considering starting at $11,000. And then I think DeChambeau is in a little bit of a different boat. He has a specific skill set that likely produces the most runaway type of potential of anyone in this field. You're going to have red flags if you model it. He's dead last in this tournament between 0 to 100 yards in my model. We know he's going to bomb drives off the tee. That's going to equate in a lot of short irons into the greens. There's multiple ways this week could unfold for him, but for me, it's going to be Rahm or DeChambeau. I think part of the problem is when you do start up there, you do create some roster deficiencies because of ownership or general construction as it is. You don't have to look any further than outright numbers to see that second part. Once we drop past Leishman at 7,500, only 2 golfers are better than 65-1 at some of the more credible offshore books. But I kind of really like if you made me pick one, it would probably be DeChambeau for me also. Try to get in ahead of it early, and his upside and his ceiling is arguably the highest in this field. You could say the same thing about Justin Thomas. We've seen him do it here before. Thomas at 40% or roughly 40%. I mean, it's going to take him off the board for me in any of the large field GPPs. If you want to play him in single entry, I think you can go about it that way, but he's just going to be difficult to play in other game types.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thought on JT going into the week. I think my first instinct was JT was who I wanted to play. I think he's going to win. Now looking at ownership at 40%, he's going to be one of the top couple priced guys. There's just so many ways from a GPP standpoint where it makes sense to pivot. Like, don't forget, while being successful at this, you have to pick good golfers. This is also more a betting game, right? Like if you play poker, right? Good poker players don't just get the best cards or the best bettors, right? And that's what this is, right? How are you constructing lineups that can get you leverage over the field? So for that reason, it's like, not playing JT for me this week is almost like folding aces. It's like, I think someone's got me beat out there, so I don't think I'm not going to go for it. So it's hard for me to do, but I'm going to play the right way. The only guy up top that you guys haven't mentioned that I am interested in is Morikawa. Listen, he's still the best ball striker in the world by a wide margin. The putting is obviously always going to be a concern here with Morikawa, but it looks like the ownership numbers are going to be reasonable. And we know that Morikawa can put together a weekend as well as anybody. So I'll definitely have him on my radar. But with him, I think sprinkling a little bit of exposure to DeChambeau makes sense, and Hovland. I'm really not all that interested elsewhere in this top range.
So a couple things. Isaiah has a question about Rahm's recent form, and does that like the recent form thing is interesting to me. But then again, you also have the long break, and I wonder, is it a wash with a guy like Rahm? Yeah, the recent form hasn't been very good, but it's been quite some time since golfers have kind of been teeing it up. Is this a concern for you guys at all?
I didn't weigh recent form whatsoever for any golfer, good or bad, in my model. One of the ways I go about my model when I do it is I run it for an overall rank sense. I run it for a GPP sense, which kind of takes away all those variables like course history and current form, and it just gives me the golfer that's going to be the best statistically. And then I run it from a cash game perspective, which adds in more of the recent form or course history. Now, there was not one of those statistics that I used recent form in whatsoever with it. So for me, a guy like Sam Burns is on fire coming into this. He's been cooled off. A guy like Rahm maybe isn't coming in with good form. I don't know where his game's at. Like, I'm not going to get off of the Rahm train if that's somebody who I want to play because, a couple results weren't good, over a month ago at this point.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, Joel. Sorry.
Yeah, no, to me, I was just going to say there's a tier of golfer where like my recent form kind of goes out the window a little bit because it's like, listen, if you're in that 1A tier like Rahm is, he's capable of being so good that the recent form I wouldn't put. It's almost good if he's not in good form because the ownership will be lower. You can get him at a better percentage. Whereas, there's some guys like Sam Burns where it's like I need to see he's in good form to want to play him. If I see Sam Burns tinkering off, I'm not interested in him. So it's just a level.
Yeah. And I think form matters a little bit more when we're in the middle of the season. I mean, we had the FedEx Cup, then we had swing season, which I don't know if Rahm was taking particularly seriously. And then, of course, we had the break. So it doesn't concern me either. One pushback here on Isaiah. So he's seeing 28% for JT. I mean, obviously, like we talked about numbers before, we're seeing much higher than that. So again, we'll have to wait for Steven's article, but I think Joel and Spencer were seeing more like the 35, 36% range and probably trending up is my guess. So anyway, that's the 10K range.
I love it. Let's keep this moving. Let's look at this 9K range. I know a lot of you guys, we mentioned a lot of people like a more balanced approach. So Spence, do you want to kick us off in the 9K range?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. We only have 3 players to discuss to begin with, but Cantlay's my favorite. Xander would be second, and I am going to have exactly 0 shares of Sam Burns if he remains anywhere near 30%. I know Burns tore up the offseason. I also think he is an elite golfer who has a real potential to crack the top 5 this year. Like this is not so much a shot at Burns as it is the momentum has cooled off. And 2, he's never played this course before. I do think having course history is going to matter a little bit when it comes down to some of the elevation, undulation that they end up facing with it. But I think Cantlay is the best leverage play. If we're looking at Xander and Burns against each other, like the ownership is virtually identical on what I'm seeing, I would rather play Xander. And even still, like, it's a real headache and something that I don't necessarily want to take on with Xander potentially. I just think Cantlay is I don't want to say the sharp way to play it this week if you're going to start here, but I think makes the most logical sense roster construction wise to where you get an elite golfer. He's a favorite in a head-to-head matchup against everybody in this range. And at some of the offshore books, he's a substantial favorite against Xander, like in the -125, -130 range with it. And he's going to be 10% less owned. And when my model kind of thinks that they're about the same to begin with, and some of the sharp money is kind of agreeing or going to the player that I'd rather play, like that kind of just doubles down on the fact for me.
I'm sorry, this is really funny. I got distracted at the end of your answer because I do have the game on behind me, which may or may not be distracting to both you two and viewers, but I'm actually waiting for that Kansas State game. I don't know that I have an angle, but I might be putting a play on that before 9 o'clock. That's the football game, of course. By the way, Spencer, I totally agree with you. I don't think I'm going to be playing any Sam Burns. I think his stock is at a really high point right now. People are buying. That's fine if they want to do that. But in this tournament with this field, I'd rather buy what I see as a dip coming, even if it's not a big dip, a dip nonetheless, and especially at the ownership. I'm just not really interested. I think if you wanted to play him in cash, and same with Xander, I kind of get it, but I just like this field so much, even in the 8K range, that I don't see the upside really of taking Sam Burns unless he wins it. I mean, or top threes, I get it, but like, I don't think that's going to happen with him. I just don't. And Xander's another guy I'll probably be off if he wasn't super. If it ended up being Sam Burns and Cantley were the popular ones, I'd probably pivot to Xander, but
I would also.
They're not. Yeah, they're not. It's Xander and Sam Burns. So to your point, Spencer, I think Cantley's a great fit here. So I'm happy to play Cantley at lower ownership than those two.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty aligned in this range. I actually don't love this range much at all. So there's a good chance I'm probably pretty low owned here. But the guy I like the most is Cantley as well, for the same reasons you guys mentioned. Ownership play. I mean, he's very much so as good as the other guys, if not better. So I think he just makes the most sense. But yeah, my stance here is I don't think you have to play anyone in this range. I mean, it's a small range, and these guys definitely aren't must play. So let's keep this moving. Let's go down to the 9K range here. The 8K range. Sia, you wanna kick us off there?
Yeah, there's four guys in particular that I like. And I'll start with, I'm going to leave off the highest priced guy because I'll get back to him. I really like Daniel Berger on this course. I mean, I just love how he's striking the ball. I think he can get hot with the putter. So I like him. I like Cameron Smith a lot. The only problem with Cameron Smith is he's going to be really popular. Cameron Smith isn't great off the tee, but that shouldn't hurt him too badly here. And we know he can get really, really wildly hot with the short game and specifically the putter. So I think at 8,300, I already have an outright on him. Spoiler alert for the end of the show. I got it, I think at 24 or 28 to 1. I think now it's more like 22 to 1. But yeah, I like Cameron Smith a lot. I think he should be priced a lot higher, probably right around where Jordan Spieth is priced. Abraham Answer, I think, is a guy who's not going to be wildly owned. Great ball striker, can get absolutely hot with the putter. If you're looking last 24 rounds, last 50 rounds, last 100 rounds, Abraham Answer is going to be there in the top 10, along with guys like Cam Smith, guys like Bryson DeChambeau, Cantley. So I think Answer is kind of a little under the radar. I think the win equity might be a little low, but I think the top 10 equity is actually higher than people think. The guy I left off that I should have started with, who I think has a lot of upside and is not getting any ownership, is Brooks Koepka. I understand it's not a major. I understand this is a resort course and people think he will be doing more resorting than golfing. But I also think that we've heard some stuff about him lately, that the knee issue isn't really a problem anymore, that he's a range rat all of a sudden now. And what better time to be early for him to put his stamp on maybe taking down a tournament? We know he has the upside to do it. So if he has the upside to do it, why wouldn't I play him in a GPP at low ownership and at 8,500? So I'm not in love with it. I'm not like, oh man, he's going to crush. But the idea of not playing him in a tournament at low ownership doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I'm with you. I think that totally makes sense, especially at this low ownership number I'm looking at. For a GPP perspective, I think Kepka could be a great way to get different. For me in this range, I think there's really two guys that I'm honing in on here that I like. The first is Hideki. Again, it's another play where I don't think the ownership will get too high on. I think you have a reasonable number, and we've seen when Hideki gets hot with his irons, he's as tough to beat as anybody in the field. Now, my concern with Hideki is the putter. Obviously, it's a huge concern. He's a terrible putter, and you're going to have to make some putts here. So you're going to need a week where Hideki puts a few down, but he does it. He's capable. He does it. It's just, is it going to be this week? That's the risk that I'll be willing to take here at the low ownership number. The other play that I like here, more toward the bottom range, of my favorite play in this range is Tony Fenow. You're getting somebody here who is, I think, underpriced, super affordable. His ownership numbers at under 15% is great for me, and he definitely has the upside. Again, at 8K, he doesn't have to win the tournament. If you're worried about, Tony doesn't have win equity, fine. If he gets third or fourth, you need to get some of these guys in the top 10. He can get there. He's not your most expensive golfer. I think Tony makes a ton of sense here. So he's probably my favorite play in the 8K range. Spence, how about you? Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, I like the $8,000 range a lot in general. There are 5 players, I would say, that stand out above the rest. So Jordan Spieth is probably my favorite play on the entire board. He ranks first in this field when it comes to par 4 average, easy to hit fairways and strokes gained on Bermuda. He's been inside the top 9 in every start here since 2014. I am 100% in agreement on the Kepka call. I know we all want to nail him or not want to play him with this being a non-major. But that goes out the window when we're looking at $8,500 and sub 10% ownership. That volatility, like if he won this tournament at 9% owned, is anybody really going to be that shocked if that ends up happening? And that's kind of what it comes down to. Like if you want to diversify a build, you can do it with Kepka and find a player that has real win equity at a number and an ownership percentage that nobody really wants to get behind. Cameron Smith is starting to approach that danger zone of being 30% owned. I unfortunately missed the 28-1 number on him. I think that was an absolute steal in the outright market. I do think he works very well for a course like this. Maybe you can pair him if you want to get around the ownership a little bit. Cantlay and Rahm are two guys that you can pair him with where you kind of get a little bit more of the leverage spot up top, and then you find a popular play with Cameron Smith there. I said on my Be the Number podcast yesterday that I didn't necessarily love Answer, but if he's going to be 12 to 13% owned, I think he makes a great leverage for GPPs. And then Fenow is arguably my favorite play on this board other than Spieth. I just think he's a really fun GPP target where if you want to get away from somebody like Brooks because you want a higher floor, I think Fenow checks a lot of those boxes. And I also think his upside is better than people give it credit for, especially if we're talking about a top 5 performance that he can give us here in the bottom of the $8,000 range. He tends to play safer golf on slow greens, and safer meaning that he's just not imploding as much. And these are wide open surfaces and fairways as it is with it. And I think that might help him a little bit with some of the par 5 struggles he's had recently. We've seen him over the past handful of months not scoring par 5s because he's, so wayward off the tee that his second shot is more of a layup than anything else. And he has the distance to get it out there. His long irons are good. And if he's not in danger, like his par 5 scoring numbers should naturally go up. So I think if you're weighing models and you're looking at where he ranks on a par 5 scoring, I would naturally kind of just boost that number in my head and say, if he is, well, I can tell you what he is in my model par 5 scoring. He would be 19th in this field over the last year. And that's out of 38 players, not something that you necessarily want to hear. But I really think that the wide open nature puts all of that to rest. I think that this guy can bomb it off the tee. I think he's going to open up opportunities for himself. And look, this might be the year of Fenow. It's been a long time coming that Fenow deserves to get some of these wins that he hasn't gotten. And I kind of love this spot for him.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, the upside is certainly there. I do have a question for you guys coming from the chat. And I saw this the other day, and it specifically kind of pertains to Bryson. So the new rule about driver length. So Bryson in the match, in the Thanksgiving match against Brooks Koepka, he had a 48-inch driver. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that might have, prior to that, he was using something that was probably shorter than that. I'm guessing maybe within those 46-inch parameters. But given that he has used a longer driver and that he can no longer do that, is that something that concerns either of you?
Not for me necessarily. I just think that his distance, yes, while it's such a benefit for him, it maybe not so much at this particular course because it's so wide open. Mm-hmm. It might help him a little bit moving forward. I think one of the problems he gets himself into is that he relies on that driver so much of hitting it as far as he can, and he puts himself into a lot of very precarious positions. Maybe for a 1-week sample size, it could hurt him a little bit, but I don't think moving forward it will. It might help his game.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he thinks every tournament is a long drive tournament. It's like, dude, no, stop showing off. Just play the course. Sorry, Joel, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I'm a little bit to be determined. I think it would be more of a factor for me in a cut event with 150 golfers. I think in a field like this, it's just not, I still think he's capable of playing well with the smaller driver. So I'm not going to remove him from my field because of that. I might consider doing it in 150 golfers, but not here.
Fair enough. And Charlie did point out, I read this, I think, in the same article, no more yardage books as well. So that's, something to consider, I guess, particularly for Bryson as well.
Yeah, that actually is more concerning for me for Bryson than the driver. I mean, Bryson is notoriously known to be obsessed with that. And they spend 25 minutes every shot examining the book. If he doesn't have that, I think that just might also be in his head of how do I approach each swing, because that's sort of what I'm used to.
That's actually what I'm worried about. Just him getting in his own head thing. I think that's like a real thing that Bryson's going to deal with his entire career. That would worry me a little bit, even for this tournament. So I'll concede that point for sure.
Totally. Let's keep this train moving, baby. We are grooving. All right, the 7K range. I'm going to kick us off here. For me, the sweet spot is really the 8K range. I think the top of the 7K range I like, between Patrick Reed and Harris English, the old college rivals, if you will. I think these two priced right next to each other. They're both reasonable ownership right now. We haven't seen Reed recently look too great, but it's there. I think almost like, the long pause or break was, in my opinion, probably good. We know what Patrick Reed is long term. We haven't seen it recently. It's time for him to kind of adjust back to the norm. And Harris English is someone who I think very easily could have been priced up in this 8K range, who's in the same tier as those guys. The ownership isn't overly high. He's another way where you can make salaries work by cramming him in. Below that, I do think there's a drop-off in this range in just terms of tier and talent level. These guys are playable, but I think those are the best two. If you wanted to take a consideration on, Leishman or Gooch, I would be open to it. But for the most part, I'm really honed in on English and Reed here. Spencer, how about you? Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's kind of what I was saying in the betting market to begin with. We see the odds substantially decrease at a certain point here. And I would say that more so comes, I guess, with Leishman, kind of like non-Horschel. I don't want to play non-Horschel this week, and I'm in the same boat with you where I think the sweet spot is the $8,000 range. I do think that those four higher price guys in Reed, English, Kokrak, and Leishman make some sense. I think a lot of the exposure is probably going to go in the way of Reed and Leishman. For that reason, I'd be more inclined to flip the script and maybe overuse Kokrak or English for what I would normally play them at compared to those other two. Obviously that's just like a basic answer with it, but I think this is the point where I have less hope of what's going to happen from these guys. Like, I think you're hoping for a top 10 result for most of these guys past Patrick Reed or Leishman or whoever you want to name in that group of, the 4 or 5 guys we've talked about. And after that, it's like, well, I hope the guy comes in the top 10, or I hope the guy doesn't come dead last place almost with it. So I'm going to kind of have more balanced builds this week. There are a couple guys in the $6,000 range, if push comes to shove, that I will throw into lineups. But I kind of want to keep the win equity in a better spot, because for me, you're just hoping for a top 20 out of most of these guys other than the 4 I mentioned, and maybe throw Gooch into the mix. I don't love Gooch this week, especially with the ownership, but he would be the 5th if you wanted to throw him into the mix.
Yep, I'm aligned with you there. See, how about you? Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, this is a tough range. I think if you happen to get the guy right in this range, or the 1 or 2 guys you might happen to play from here, I think you're going to have a really successful tournament if they happen to be, a top 10, top 5 guy. And I agree. I think where the upside lies is probably with Patrick Reed, as bad as he's been, and it's bad. He has finished kind of high in some, middling tournaments at the Hero and at the Bermuda, 3rd and 2nd. But the metrics aren't really adding up. If you look at his game off the tee on approach, it's pretty bad, but it's still Patrick Reed. So you've either decided that Patrick Reed is never going to be good again, or you've decided, well, at some point, Patrick Reed's going to be good. And it looks like there's some glimmer of good over the last couple of months. So let me try to be early on Patrick Reed, who I know has some win equity even in this field. So that's sort of like the permutations I'm going through, which means if I'm playing 5 GPP lineups, 5 tournament lineups, I'm probably going to have Patrick Reed in one of them. Probably not 2. I'm just going to dabble in Patrick Reed and hope I get lucky. But that's about it for him. I think Jason Kokrak and Mark Leishman are my next favorite guys. They can both get really hot with the putter. Both can get really hot on approach. I think it's probably more Kokrak than Leishman with respect to that, but I think they're both good plays, both good prices. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else I like in this 7K range. And frankly, I don't really like any of the guys I mentioned too much, but I am going to have to play some of them with some of my lineup construction. So those are the guys I have my eyes on.
The thing that's worth noting about Patrick Reed also is he was in the hospital with pneumonia for, during that end of the
FedEx Cup.
season.
Yeah.
During the FedEx Cup there. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, while the results aren't necessarily where you would want them to be, second place at the Bermuda shows that it's coming back in the right direction. And this is a venue that he has found tons of success. He's winner here in 2015, 2 second place finishes in 2016 and 2020. I just think that he's an interesting guy to keep in mind. And he's going to be popular. He's going to be, my numbers have him at about 20%, but that's not a number that I'm not going to be willing to take. And his upside is to win the tournament. And that's like, I know I keep saying it. This is the last group of players where that is like a legitimate answer you can give to them.
And one thing just to keep in mind, I know Spence is what you were saying, 20% here is average versus 20% at a regular tournament is like, we don't want to play them. 20% here is just average. There's only 40 guys. So, 20% is just kind of middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's the, in my model, he's the 16th highest owned guy on the board out of 38 players.
Right. So, middling. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. All right. Well, the 6K range, to me, yuck. Not a lot I love here. Definitely some sprinkles I'll put in because, you'll probably have to just for construction. I'm definitely going to stay away from the higher owned guys down here just because there is a significant gap in talent level. So like a guy like Seamus Power, while he's probably the best or one of the top golfers in this range, he looks like the highest ownership, which I'd rather pivot off of him and look at maybe somebody on the lower end. Maybe you can catch Eric Van Rooyen with a hot week at 6,100, or maybe you want to hope Kevin Kisner shows up of a week at 6K flat. Maybe Stuart Sink you could throw in if you really want to get different. And the last guy I'll even mention is Lucas Herbert, who finally showed up and won the Bermuda. The reason I want to mention him specifically is because this is a guy who has been like, hey, he's been really good in the Euro Tour. He's going to be an next guy who's going to be able to compete. And he really never had too much success in the U.S. And he won that Bermuda tournament. Now, it's the Bermuda. It's a JV tournament. There wasn't a lot of talent there. But hey, he beat Patrick Reed, who was in that tournament. So I think, maybe he's crossed the line. And if you want to say he's, got over a hump and he's going to compete this year in the U.S., it's kind of a narrative I'm building for myself to make myself be okay with playing him. But other than that, not a lot to love for me down here in the 6K range. See, how about you?
Let me ask for Isaiah's sake. KH Lee is interesting considering his price. Anybody interested in him?
Nick and I talked about him a little bit on the Better Golf Pod just because that's
of
his
course
guy,
you did.
But
yes.
Yeah. I think I guess just no.
It can just be no. That's okay.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with Spencer. I don't want to just say no. I want to say no in the same tone that he did. It's like no, but like maybe, but no.
It just gets really ugly down here. Like, it's not a range that I really want to be in for the most part. Like, every one of these guys across the board, if you told me that they came in dead last place, I'd be like, yep, that makes sense to me. There is not one player in this range that I would be shocked at that outcome.
Yeah. One guy I was looking at, two guys in the flat 6K range were Lucas Glover and Stuart Sink. I don't think I'm going to play either of them. What's really interesting about Lucas Glover is his ball striking has been so good, but his just like Kyle Stanley, like he just can't putt around the green is terrible. He just can't do it. So I don't know. I think Lucas Glover is interesting. But yeah, I agree with you there. Was it on me for the 6K guys?
Yes, hit us.
Yeah, I don't really like many either. I think Seamus Power is one thing I wanted to note about Seamus Power. If you look at his strokes gain data, you're going to see some really impressive stuff. But you also have to consider the fields that he's going against versus like what some of these high-end golfers like Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, the fields that they're playing in. And one thing I just wanted to point out, like Rick Run Good on his site, he has actually, like, you can view the weighted model. What he's done is he's weighted the tournaments that these guys are playing in and adjusted the strokes gained metrics accordingly. With that said, I just want you to know, because he did that on the first cut where I was on with him and Greg Ducharme yesterday. He actually, clicked the view weighted part and measured what Seamus Power went from. I think he was like second or third because of these low end tournaments he's playing in terms of like total strokes gained. He moved to 19, which actually isn't that bad considering his price. So if you actually adjust for the competition that Seamus Power is going against, he's still inside the top 20 and then obviously still presents value. But at the same time, it's not like he's a guaranteed value. And if his ownership is super high, then, he's not good enough to say he's a free square in this field. So it's kind of one of those things where you're definitely eating chalk if you're playing Seamus Power. But, I might have him in a lineup or two. With that said, I think Max Homa, I think his putting has been like god awful as well. So that's something to look out for because you're going to have to make putts in this tournament. With that said, I do think he has maybe not win equity in this tournament, but I think if the putter's hot, he can be somewhere near the top of the leaderboard. It's a small shot, but this is the 6K range after all. So it's Max Homa as a consideration, Seamus Power, Eric Van Rooyen. I kind of like Joel Damon. I'm still kind of considering. I may come around on, and I think that's about it.
I like that. And one thing I will add about this 6K range for this tournament is don't forget that they all are guaranteed 4 days. So the reason I'm saying that is because somebody could finish like 25th place, but like get a bunch of birdies and just blow up on a couple holes. And in this small of a field, that could be in a winning lineup because it's about scoring. It's not about, the final finishing points might not all matter because there's only so many options here. So, you can build a lineup where you take a guy who's just really good at getting birdies or eagles and you bank that they just get hot. And even if they blow up one day and they're not really in the top 20, their scoring could be good, high, and that could be in a winning lineup. So
that's a really good point. And it's a good reason to, when you're looking at models, to maybe take it like for look at the whole picture, but then just look at DK points, look at birdie or better gained. Look at strokes gained par 5 or par 5 scoring. Just look at those. And if that's the differentiator, if that's the tiebreaker between two guys, then make that the tiebreaker. I think that's perfectly acceptable, especially in a 4-round tournament. I think it's a really good point.
For sure. Anything else from the field before we look at some of them outrights?
I have one thing to say. I have the player that you guys are discussing right now. If either of you guys would like to guess who it is.
I would.
Okay.
You mean the guy that's great in the scoring metrics and the birdie or better and all that?
It's the guy. Yeah, the guy this week that is going to finish in whatever place he finishes in, but he's going to make 1 million birdies and far exceed his finishing position.
Well, is he in the 6K range?
Yes.
Okay. Is it Cam Davis?
I like Cam Davis a little bit, but no, it's not Cam Davis.
All right, that's my guess. Joel, your go.
Is it Seamus Power?
No, I don't love. I don't think Seamus is a great course fit here. I don't love the ownership. It is Phil Mickelson at 6,500.
I'm so mad I didn't say that.
There's a lot I like about Mickelson in reality. I mean, like, he's third in this field on slow Bermuda and at longer courses that feature easy to hit fairways. His short irons are still as good as anybody in the world. That's going to be a really relevant distance this week. I wouldn't be shocked if he got himself to be the first round leader. I don't think he can maintain it for 4 days, but that's kind of what you guys are talking about. Of one day he goes wild in scoring, and then the next day he makes, 3 triple bogeys and makes 6 birdies to go along with it and shoots some weird score that way. The only other 2 guys that I found intriguing to some extent, Garrett Cago 6,400 and then Lucas Herbert at 6,100 also. I think all the reasons, Joel, of why you said Herbert makes a lot of sense with that. My data with him is very limited, but good par 5 scorer with the limited data I have. Great with his short irons. He's been a good putter. I think that if like somebody's going to put it together that's down in this range that you're not expecting, and by put it together, they give you a top 10 finish, Herbert might be, other than Mickelson, I guess my favorite person to try to target in builds.
I love it.
So real quick, Joel, we've got this. So I've got 6 players that I've noted to be very chalky, like north, like somewhere in the 30% or north-ish range. So let Joel, I'll run this segment real quick. I'm just going to pass it on to you. Joel, we'll start with you, and then Spencer will go to you. Now, we're talking about chalk in terms of tournaments, because chalk and cash really isn't a super bad thing. So when I say good chalk or bad chalk and you guys answer, that means you're saying it's either good chalk or bad chalk in a tournament. All right, so let's start with, I'm not going to go in, I'm going to actually go not in order of pricing necessarily. I'm just going to go on my list of where my ranked players were with my old model that now needs to be updated after Spencer went. Sam Burns, good chalk or bad chalk?
Bad.
Very bad.
Very, very bad. I just wanted to one up Spencer. Bryson. He's not really super chalky. He's actually like more in like the 25% range. But so that's not a really good one, but I'm going to throw that out to you as well. Joel.
Bad.
Good.
Yeah, I lean good there too. Justin Thomas, super chalky.
Good.
I'm going to say bad. I mean, I don't want to play a 40% owned golfer. He's the number one statistical player for me in this field. This is one of those ugly spots where I don't think he's going to implode, and that's what makes it so difficult. But I don't know how I get to him at 40%.
Yeah, it's bad for me. And I know how he's going to implode. If that were to happen, it would be with the putter because it happens to him a lot. So his course history here is great. So, and that's part of the reason he's 40%. And it's also part of the reason I'm not going to be playing him. Cam Smith, good chalk, bad chalk, Joel?
Bad.
I think he's a great outright bet. I think even at 22-1, you can still consider him as an outright bet. His course history here, and I'm not going to be looking at that and putting it as a huge negative. He's not been great here historically. True. I think he can win this tournament. I also think his downside is a little bit higher than some of these players.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree that it's bad chalk. We've got two players left. Sung J M, good chalk, bad chalk?
Good.
Yeah, I think Sung Jae's good chalk also.
I'm going to have to disagree with you guys. It's bad chalk. Okay, the last one, Xander Schauffele. Good chalk or bad chalk? Again, chalk here is 30%-ish or higher, even though I gave that one exception with Bryson DeChambeau. It was more like 25%. 30%-ish or higher.
I'm going to go bad.
My model thinks that 30% is fair for him. So I guess based off of that, I should say good. Or fair is really the real answer to that. But I'll say that if he's fair, he's good.
Well, that's another incorrect answer from Spencer. It's bad chalk, I'm afraid to say. All right, that's it. That does the good chalk, bad chalk segment. Thank you, Jesse, for pointing that out to us.
I love it. Well, fellas, one last thing before we wrap out. Let's look at the betting market. Let's take a quick peek at some outright tickets. Sia, you want to kick us off? You got any outrights for this week?
First of all, let me promote Spencer's pod. So you did the Better Golf pod already with Sticks Picks, right?
We did. Yeah, Nick was back. It was nice to have him back. That's a great show. It's going to be, hopefully it's out already. I don't know if Nick has posted it yet, but it's going to be out tonight.
And that covers all the head-to-heads you guys like, top 10s, top 20s, top 40s, and outrights as well.
We cover everything that's on that board between all of that stuff. I mean, we try to run it down as in-depth as we can. We even got into a little bit of DraftKings talk with it. So, nice. Nick is one of the sharpest guys in the industry. Definitely see you have all three of our opinions when it comes to DFS, but Nick had some really stout takes also when it came to the DraftKings board.
Love it. Okay, cool. So everybody catch that show. It's a pretty, usually a quick listen. What'd you guys record? 30 minutes, 40?
We went a little bit longer this week with him coming back. It's a 57-minute or 50-something minute episode. But yeah, it's typically a 30 to 40-minute show max on it. But there was a lot to talk about with him coming back on the show and all the football, everything he's doing.
Cool. So let me start. I'll start. I only have two outrights. I'll probably end up live betting this one, Thursday, Friday, depending on the circumstances. But I'm just going to give out two outrights. It's a short field. I have 4 first-round leaders, maybe 5. I might add one. But my outrights, I already said one of them, Cam Smith at 22-1. I actually got him. He's 22-1 now. I think you could probably get him in some places, probably 24-1. I think I might have gotten him at 28-1. I'm not sure. But I like him. And then Brooks Koepka at 30-1. I don't love Brooks Koepka, but I think 30-1 is a long enough number for me to be interested in the value there. There's obviously some guys I like in this tournament that are much shorter, but I'm not really interested in taking anybody 20-1 or lower, not even in this tournament. If I were to, it would probably be Patrick Cantlay at plus 1800, 18-1.
Well, now I'm concerned. Do we have different lines? Because maybe we.
Oh, you know what? For Cantlay, I have the wrong line. Cantlay is plus 1400.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think I have Cam Smith at 2200. Yep. and Kepka at 30 to 1. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So I'm actually a little different than you. I'm taking a couple long shots. I'm not going crazy, but there's two plays I like. One's Kepka at 30 to 1. I think, if you're going to take an outright ticket, getting a 30 to 1 number here on someone with Kepka, that's how I like. And the other is 25 to 1 on Tony Finau. For me, I think I like to see a strategy of, maybe looking at this again on Saturday or Friday and live betting it. If, Finau or Kepka are in the top 5 or 10, that odds are going to look significantly different. If you're going to bet Morikawa or Thomas and they're in the top 10 or something, the odds can't really change all that much. They're still going to be 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 or something. So I'll wait and bet them Friday or Saturday. But for now, these are the guys I'll take early when the odds will jump a lot if they're in contention. Spence, how about you?
I mean, it's funny. The three guys that did not end up making my outright ticket are the ones you mentioned. So I didn't end up betting Finau, didn't end up betting Kepka, didn't end up betting Cam Smith. I think they are all great values. I think they're all great picks. That would have been the next range I would have gone to if I didn't go as top heavy as I did on my card. Jordan Spieth 22 to 1, and I got a 14 to 1 on DeChambeau. I'm going to bet on DeChambeau's upside of him going potentially wire to wire on this. And that's I even think a 12 to 1. That's where it's currently at right now. I'm fine with that number. I think 8 to 1 is proper on him. I just think that those are the two guys that provide the best win equity for a realistic price that I could find. And then it was that Kepka, Finau, Cam Smith group after that I just don't have enough room on my card to add them.
That makes sense. But now we make our real money. This is where we put it all on the line, literally all of it, the whole account and your mortgage and everything else that you saved in your entire life on this bet. And the whole year changes because then you're rich because it's a guarantee. First round leader. Spence, who you got? You got any first round leader plays for us?
Yeah, I had two, but I feel like now if I don't have any exposure to Finau, I might need to get some exposure to Fenow after this. This might not be a good thing if I don't have it, but the two I have, Phil Mickelson, 55 to 1. As I said, I don't know if he can put it together for 4 days, but I do think he can go low for one of the rounds. Hopefully that being Thursday. And Jason Kokrak at 31 to 1. I think Kokrak is a volatile golfer. I do think that the number though is very intriguing on him for a guy that we know he can get hot with his putter. And if he puts it together on Thursday, he can shoot a number in that, 10 under par, better range, whatever it ends up needing to be to win the tournament or to win that day.
Totally. I like that. I got two as well. My two are going to be Abraham Answer at 25 to 1. I just think it's a good number on him for a guy. Putting one day together, a really solid day I like. And my fun Hail Mary play is going to be Lucas Herbert at 55 to 1. I do like Mickelson too. I think I might add that ticket because I like that call. I think it's a good call. But again, these are going to be small, Hail Mary plays for me. I'm waiting on Sia to punch my true ticket on the lock of the year. So Sia, hit us with it. Who you got for first round leaders?
That was an awesome drum roll. Goosebumps, by the way, actual goosebumps. So here's the thing. What's really cool? So I have 4 first round leaders, which is kind of cheating because it's over 10% of the field at this point. But there's one that you definitely just really want to be focused upon. Okay. I'm going to give the other 3 first. Brooks Koepka at 28 to 1. Jason Kokrak at 31 to 1, just like Spencer. And Max Homa at 40 to 1. If he happens to find the putter on Thursday, he's a competitor. He could be the first round leader. 40 to 1 is a nice little number on Max Homa. However, here's the really cool thing, okay? I'm about to give you the first round leader, which I think at this point, if you're watching the show, this is an absolute lock, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. What's the date today? Does anybody know the date today?
January 4th.
Okay. So approximately 10 days ago, what happened? It was Christmas, right? And if you celebrate Hanukkah, that was around the same time as well. It was the holiday season. What happens during the holiday season? You get gifts. Sometimes those gifts are cash or whatever, something of a monetary value. And if you didn't, by the way, if you don't have that cash on hand to put on my first round leader, you probably got some sort of present. And at this point, only 10 days after Christmas or the holiday season as a whole, you probably still have the box. You probably still have the receipt, and you probably are within the return policy. So you still have, it's only Tuesday night, you still have 2 days to return all of your gifts, not just some of your gifts, but all of your gifts. Because keep in mind, you'll be able to repurchase them after the first round leader. You want to put as much money on as possible on this, as Joel reminded us a few months back. Take all of that money that you have, which should be a lot. And if it's not a lot, borrow from your friends. Tell them you need it for some emergency. You got to put it on Joel's guy. Abraham Answer at 25-1 is going to be your first round leader at the 2022 Sentry Tournament of Champions. You're welcome, America. Don't worry about those Christmas gifts, those Hanukkah gifts, those holiday gifts. You will be able to repurchase them. You do need that money, though, to put on the first round leader. The more money, the better. You're welcome.
And you know what's even more of a lock? We didn't even talk that out. I didn't know we were both taking the same guy. So if we both are taking the same guy as a first round leader,
you might want to bet it right now, because the sports books are probably listening and they're probably going to take that number down or make it so prohibitive, like 2-1 or something, that you're just not going to want to bet it.
That's going to move to minus 250 within the hour for sure.
Can I say something? This is such a lock that even at minus 250, here's what I'll say. I would bet it up to minus 400. At a certain point, at minus 450, there could be an injury, COVID is abound. That could be a thing. But outside of that, minus 400, lock it in.
But I would hurry up, because you can still get plus odds right now, which is bizarre. So
I just checked. I just reloaded it, and it's still, the number's still up. It hasn't sunk yet. It's crazy.
I mean,
somebody's
you're welcome. Listen, we might not have sent you all gifts that were wrapped, but we did just give you a free bet that's going to guaranteed hit. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. You're welcome. Any final words?
I mean, I can say I'm really glad golf is back. It's funny what the PGA Tour does, right? They have their off season during the heart of football season. Maybe that's a coincidence. Probably not. It's really smart if it's not a coincidence, because I think a lot of golf fans happen to be NFL fans too. And a lot of golf or NFL bettors and DFS players happen to be golf DFS and bettors as well. So I think it's just a perfect transition to start to get into the heart of PGA season as football is winding down.
Perfect timing. Couldn't agree with you more. It was a pleasure getting back with you guys. I've missed golf. I've missed you all. I'm excited to be back. Please hit the like button. Give us a follow. Come back next week. Let us know how you did. And see ya. One last thing.
Yeah. So in this, I'm changing things a little bit. Yeah. Spoiler alert. Yeah. This is going to be a little different, because it is 2022 and we are going to end the shows a little differently now. Sport.